Okay, let's get into it. We're diving deep today into this really high-profile trade deal, the one between the U.S. and Vietnam.
Right, the one announced by former President Trump.
Exactly. It was billed as part of his 90 deals in 90 days thing, and well, it certainly got people talking with lots of different takes right off the bat.
Yeah, definitely. And that's really our mission here, isn't it? To cut through the noise, go beyond the headline. We've got sources here, journalists, economists, commentators, and we're going to unpack what this deal actually says.
And figure out what it means for you listening at home.
Precisely.
So, okay, the announcement itself, Trump puts it on Truth Social, says it was a great honor after talking with Lam, Vietnam's general secretary.
Right.
And he lays out these terms: a 20% tax on all imports from Vietnam, and then 40% on what he called transshipping.
Which is basically goods moving through Vietnam to maybe dodge other tariffs.
Gotcha. And alongside that, he claims the U.S. gets total access to sell goods in Vietnam. So, total access, but also these taxes. How does that actually work?
Well, that's where it gets interesting and confusing, perhaps, because the interpretation started diverging immediately.
Okay.
You had Olga Nesterova, foreign affairs journalist, jump right in. Her take was essentially Trump's taxing Americans 20 to 40%.
Because tariffs usually get passed on.
Exactly, passed on to consumers or businesses here. Meanwhile, she argues, Vietnam gets U.S. products for free under this total access claim.
Huh. That's quite a different framing.
It is. And it really helps to bring in some economic context about Vietnam itself.
Yeah, I saw some data, I think, from Numbeo. Paints a very different picture over there.
Totally different. I mean, think about it. A soda costs like 50 cents.
Wow.
A monthly cell phone bill, under $6. Rent for a one-bedroom in the city center, maybe under $400 a month. It's just a vastly different scale.
Which has big implications for trade, I imagine.
Huge. Which brings us to Craig Harrington's point. He's a political and media researcher.
Okay, what did he find?
You look at the numbers. In 2024, the U.S. exported only about, $13.1 billion to Vietnam.
Okay.
But Vietnam exported $136.6 billion to the U.S. Massive difference.
Whoa. Yeah, that's a huge imbalance.
And Harrington's argument is pretty clear. Tariffs aren't why U.S. exports are low. It's the relative economic situation, the poverty level in Vietnam compared to the U.S. They just can't buy the same volume of stuff.
So just slapping tariffs on imports doesn't magically make them buy more U.S. goods.
Kind of puts the total access claim in perspective, doesn't it?
It really does. There was also a point about this deal maybe not being so new.
Yes. Justin Wolfers, University of Michigan professor, he brought up the TPP.
The Trans-Pacific Partnership.
He pointed out that this new deal's promise of tariff-free access for U.S. businesses, that was basically offered 8 years ago in the TPP.
The TPP that Trump famously pulled the U.S. out of?
The very same. And Wolfers adds, Trump's current deal actually adds a 20% tax on Americans importing Vietnamese goods, which the TPP didn't do.
So wait, similar access, but now with an added tax for Americans?
That's Wolfers' analysis, yeah. So you can imagine how that went over.
I'm guessing. Not well.
Generally, no. The reaction from commentators was pretty strong. Brian Krassenstein called it straight up horrible for the U.S.
Horrible. Why?
He basically said it's like they want inflation, making U.S. businesses pay 20–40% more for imports.
Okay.
The group Republicans against Trump echoed that, just saying it sounds like a really terrible deal.
Even Republicans against Trump were critical.
Yep. And Mehdi Hasan, Zateo News founder, he was even more blunt. He accused Trump of brazenly and deliberately lying.
Strong words.
Very. Hasan argued it's American consumers and businesses who will end up paying these new taxes.
So a lot of pushback arguing this hurts the U.S., not helps.
Overwhelmingly, yes. And then there's the timing aspect, which adds another layer.
Oh, what about the timing?
Craig Harrington brought this up, too. Apparently, there was a public proposal for a zero-rate tariff offer in Vietnam made on April 4th.
Okay, April 4th.
But Trump announced his deal, the Liberation Day deal, on April 2nd.
Before the other offer was even public.
Seems like it. Which led Harrington to conclude that, after claiming 90 deals in 90 days, Trump had essentially done nothing in 3 months on this front that was actually new or beneficial.
Huh. So putting it all together, it sounds like the announcement was big, but the substance maybe less so?
That seems to be the core critique emerging from these sources, yes. The key takeaways. First, New deals sometimes aren't really new, or might even be worse than previous offers like the TPP.
Right, repackaged maybe?
Could be. And second, the underlying economics, like that huge difference in cost of living and wealth between countries, really dictates trade flows, perhaps more than tariffs alone can fix.
So for you listening, the big picture here is really about looking past the headlines on these trade announcements. Because these global agreements, they seem distant, but they can directly impact the prices you pay, the goods available, everything right here.
Absolutely. It brings us back to that final question to chew on, really.
Yeah.
What does this whole episode, the deal itself, the claims, the sharp reactions tell us about how international trade deals get made and sold to the public today? And what could that mean for economic policy down the road?
Something to think about for sure. How perception and reality might differ in these big negotiations.